We're fighting a battle. We're singing the same song, trying to find someone who cares as much as we do. We're climbing the ladder while we're sinking in this boat, trying to find someone who cares.
Hello and welcome back to Babble Scribbler, the podcast show about MLP fandom and fandom personalities and everything to do with the things that we create to do with pastel horses in a cartoon aimed at small girls. Today I am joined by Neighrator Pony, and he's going to introduce himself now.
Hello everyone, I am Neighrator Pony. I have just a tiny little channel on YouTube and I read some MLP fanfictions. And I've been at this about just about 9 months now, so I'm still a baby, sort of in the MLP fanfiction reading world, still finding my feet. But my good friend Scribbler here was kind enough to invite me on the podcast today.
He does an amazing King Stomper impression. Everybody needs to go and listen to Plural Possessive because it's amazing. And today we are going to be talking about... Actually, we're talking about a fanfiction that neither of us did a reading of, but one of our friends, Thornquill of Thornquill Audiobooks, who was previously on this podcast. He did a reading of something called Intergration by Raugos. I think that's how you pronounce it.
Yes.
And when I asked Neighrator if he wanted to be on the podcast, I said, what would you like to talk about? And he said, I want to talk about integration, please. And I'm going to leave him to explain why and what it's about.
Yeah, this was, first of all, let me just say that not only was it fic fantastic, but Thornquill's audiobook presentation of this was absolutely fantastic. He did a great job, top to bottom. And that's especially impressive considering what a long fic it is. Maybe just long by my standards, but the quality is consistent throughout. Great music and sound effects. So Thornquill really ought to be applauded for his wonderful work in there. He did a terrific job. Oh, yes, absolutely.
Round of applause. It is 118,733 words spread across 13 chapters for those who are interested. It's a long one.
Very, very long by my standards, at least. I've never done anything, an audiobook production half that long. But the story itself, written by Raugos, which I believe is how you pronounce that, follows the story of a pony named Caramel, who's a background pony we see sometimes in the series, and it follows his slow integration, as the name would suggest, into as he becomes a changeling.
Yep, he has followed his special sun pony, who was seen during the Perfect Stallion song, Sassaflash, a Pegasus who previous to that had kind of been mooted as being the new Wind Whistler, but she's not Wind Whistler, she's Sassaflash, and in this she's his special sun pony, who turns out to be a changeling, and he chases her to the hive. And because he loves her so much, he agrees to become a changeling, which he didn't even know was possible till he got there, just so that he can be with her. And the story details his physical transformation at the hooves of Chrysalis, and also his mental and cultural transformation as he becomes part of the changeling hive and realizes that ponies and changelings have had an integrated history, well, an intertwined history. And there doesn't need to be the antipathy between them. But how do you try and heal a rift that is several hundred years old when one of the participants has just tried to invade the other and take over the mind of their would-be monarch?
Yeah,
just a little bit of a sticking point there.
Yeah.
So why did you want to talk about this fic in particular?
Mostly just because I enjoyed it so much. It was there's a lot of reasons to enjoy, but just more than anything, just top to bottom, it just held my attention so well. I was just Thornquill. I started listening to his production when he was about 8 chapters in, and then he got to about chapter 10, and I'd listened to them all. Then it was a long period of waiting while I waited for him to finish the rest of them. But I was just on pins and needles the whole time. It was really, really exciting. So there's a lot going on here. The story is kind of told via a series of flashbacks between the past and the present, and you get to see Caramel as he was growing up in, well, I guess it could be Ponyville, could be Canterlot. That's actually one of the sticking points there, because Shining Armor is there.
Yeah, he's one of the childhood bullies.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later. That was one of the things I didn't like about it, is the depiction of Shining Armor here. It doesn't seem to fit well with what we know about the rest of it. But the story's told sort of in through a series of flashbacks where he's in his childhood and he's getting to know Sassaflash mostly.
It is told in a non-linear fashion for those who are thinking of checking this out, that each chapter is divided into 2 parts. They're not equal parts. It always starts off with a scene set in the past and then goes on with the linear storytelling of Caramel becoming part of the Changeling Hive. But it is non-linear storytelling in that you don't know how he found out, for example, that Sassaflash is a changeling until a midpoint in the story, because the flashbacks, they're running parallel. They've just chosen a different point in history to start from, and they're running parallel to the main body of the story. So some plot points become relevant later on, and you don't learn about them until later on. It's an interesting form of storytelling, and one I've adopted before now, and I've seen used quite well in other stories, and it is used quite effectively here, because it does make you want to find out what happens next. There are a lot of questions. One of the marks of a good storyteller is to keep you coming back and to make you want to know what happens next. And this one does that very, very well. It uses I think it's the Hermeneutic Code, the idea of creating questions that the audience want to have answered.
Absolutely. So yeah, this the nonlinear storytelling style here was definitely used to great effect. They did a great job of holding my attention, because I wanted to know, like, how did he get from there to here? We knew he grew up more or less as a normal pony. What led him to this decision to go out, wander out into the Badlands and try to become a changeling?
And it sounds like it could be very soppy and very cliched. You know, he's going off the love of his special sun pony, and it's true love conquers all. It's not like that, though. The time taken to develop their relationship in the flashbacks, in the non-linear storytelling, it works. I'm almost sad that Caramel and Sassaflash turned up again as background characters in season 3, 4, and 5, because I would have preferred this for them, because this is interesting. They are treated pretty much like own characters. They are background ponies, but their characters, their personalities are created almost from whole cloth.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think about that? What do you think of the personalities that Caramel and Sassaflash were given? Because they're very distinct from each other. It's kind of hard to do that with background ponies.
Yeah, so I thought Caramel was very, very well fleshed out. Oh, and the significance of his cutie mark, which is 3 horseshoes going around in a circle. I think that becomes significant later. But just because he's sort of depicted as kind of a airhead. Well, gosh, not airhead, but just kind of wandering.
He's a kind of a dreamer, isn't he?
Yeah, a dreamer.
But not in a way that it would make him annoying for those listening.
No.
He's grounded
very
enough that he's moral, he's ethical, but he's not good at noticing the obvious immediately.
No, he's not.
He does sometimes have to have things that seem obvious to everybody else. He does seem to have to point it out to him. Mm-hmm. But he's also kind and good-natured with it. The way that we're describing him, he does sound a little bit like a Gary Stu, and he's not. He has a lot of flaws and faults. And they're not the kind of superficial flaws and faults you would get in a Gary Stu. Like, he doesn't just, like, doubt himself and, that's his fault.
Clumsy.
Yeah, he's very, very clumsy. He's quite bullheaded. He's almost blinkered in that the only thing that he cares about to begin with is Sassaflash. And he has to have his worldview opened a bit. He's trying to become a changeling while simultaneously finding it all rather disgusting and not liking the changelings, which creates very much a conflict of interest when he starts to physically change. And he hates the thing that he's changing into, but he's willing to do it anyway. It
was not part of his original plan to become a changeling. I think Chrysalis kind of springs that on him. But he didn't want to go and join the hive, if only to be with Sassaflash. It just came as a surprise to him.
Yes, I think it came as a bit of a surprise to Chrysalis, as we find out later in the story. There will be spoilers from this podcast from this point onwards.
If it hasn't been obvious, yes, there will be spoilers.
Yeah, we've kind of avoided spoilers up to this point, but from here on out we are going to talk about the ending part of it as well, because the ending is paramount. But if you would like to go and listen to it, it's several hours worth, but it's worth it. Or if you want to go and read it for yourself, if audiobooks aren't your thing, what are you doing here? But now is the point to abandon ship and come back afterwards. Right, you're back then. So then, Sassaflash. This is a very interesting interpretation of her that I've never seen before.
Yeah, tell me what you thought about her.
I think that her character took a long time to become defined. And even by the very end, I don't think she was as well characterized as Sassaflash. I don't think that she was as well characterized as Caramel, which he's the main character. Yes, he's going to be very well characterized. But I think that she was painted in much broader brushstrokes. That she was consistent. I'll say that. There weren't many inconsistencies to her character, but she was also kind of bland almost. There was enough of her there to keep her interesting, but not enough there to really raise her out of secondary tier characterization.
I think I would definitely agree with that. That's one of just a minor complaint, I think. But Sassaflash's depiction here, she just didn't seem to have nearly as much to her as Caramel did. Which leads to the question, so we know that Sassaflash picked Caramel as a target very early on when they were both still children. But so we kind of have an idea of why she is interested in Caramel, which is just because it was kind of her mission. But we don't really have a really good sense of why Caramel is interested in her, other than she likes him, right? She's nice to him when everybody else doesn't like him because he's such a doofus and stuff. Which kind of begs the question, so what exactly is it that he sees in her, and what sort of relationship is this where it's completely one-sided? So it's just a minor complaint, but yeah, definitely one of the things that not as much about the story, that Sassaflash wasn't quite as fleshed out.
I think the chapter that helped with that, a lot of it, was the opening scene where she has trained herself up to be able to carry him so that he can experience flight.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I think that helped a lot, in that it showed that being around Sassaflash makes Caramel braver, and that he admires her guttiness and her confidence, and she admires the fact that he is willing to take risks and not just stay in his comfort zone. That he didn't like flight to begin with. He was absolutely terrified, but he was willing to try it. And she admired that. And she had been trying to give him an experience to sort of, I don't know, to put it almost as a reward, to give him some new experience to enjoy, to share flight with him. And that seemed very much like something a Pegasus would do.
Mm-hmm.
So she was very much living her persona. She said that she was granted citizenship when she was a Pegasus, and she lived so long as a Pegasus, she almost preferred being one than having feathers instead of a membrane.
Mm-hmm. But yes, that scene where she takes Caramel flying with her, it's nice because that's not something she would have had to do strictly within the boundaries of her mission, which is to harvest love from Caramel. She just did it because she liked him, and she wanted to give him something special that he couldn't do himself.
You can see right from the very beginning where she didn't want to swim when there were falls, and he helped her. That I think that she liked him, started to actually like him as opposed to just use him as a target, because he was showing her kindness. He didn't have to, and that he was willing to look foolish because it was the right thing to do. He put on the water wings even though he could swim perfectly well, because it made her feel better, and he was willing to endure the bully's taunts because it was morally the right thing to do. And even as a little foal, he knew that. And that was a defining thing about Caramel's character, that he is cowardly. He is a bit of an airhead, he's a bit of a dreamer. But he's willing to do what's right because it's what's right, not because it's what's easy or because it's what he wants to do. As is shown when he's a changeling, and the quarry eels. They were wonderful invention, the quarry eels.
Oh, yes.
These are gigantic eels that live in the underground rivers below the Changeling Hive, because the Changeling Hive is set underground. And the quarry eels come up and every so often swoop through the tunnels and move along the tunnels themselves by pushing their bodies along almost like snakes. And they steal changelings, and they steal pods of ponies from whom they are harvesting love, and they run away and eat them. They slither away and eat them. And at one point, Caramel, one of these quarry eels, they are massive. They are bigger than buildings. And he is willing to chase after one because it's stolen a pod of 2 ponies. And it's not that he's feeling brave. It's not that he's trying to start a rebellion because the other changelings are trying to let them go because it's easier. It's because it's the right thing to do. He just doesn't want to have it on his conscience that he did nothing when these 2 ponies were clearly going to be taken away and eaten. And that, it does cost him quite a lot, that decision.
Absolutely. This is really where the story starts to pick up, right about chapter 6 or so. This is where we really kind of get to the crux of the story, and it stops being kind of a fluffy piece and really starts asking the really hard-hitting questions. The we learned that the hive is constantly under attack by diamond dogs, by these quarry eels, and it's not nearly as easy to be on your high horse and to say that this is right and this is wrong when there's so many shades of gray in between. So the quarry eels steal a pod. Caramel is ordered to abandon it and let the eel take the pod, but he disobeys the order. And as a result, one of his changeling friends that he's come to befriend since his time down there, Rax, is killed. And so this causes Caramel no small amount of consternation, because, of course, if he had done what the Chrysalis had told him to and let the quarry eel take the pony and take the pod, then Rax would still be alive. And it was a chapter before that we learned what the changelings use the pods for, why they kidnap ponies. And they do it because they require the love energy that they generate while they're sort of sleeping and dreaming inside these pods, and they need that not only to eat but also to heal themselves after these after their hive is attacked by diamond dogs and quarry eels.
And they also need to generate magic to defend themselves, because they may have increased numbers, but they've got a reduced population because life is so hard there, and they need to have magic in order to defend those who are left. And so
one of the things we discovered in that chapter is that not only there are a bunch of other ponies that he doesn't recognize, also some of his friends came out to look for him after he wandered off to go find the hive, and they are now captives in pods.
Lucky and Cherryberry.
And see, Chrysalis actually forces him. We learned that Chrysalis has the ability to essentially mind control any of the other changelings, to force them to do whatever she wants, really. And so she forces him to feed off of his friends, essentially.
To heal him. She says it's for his own good, and that's, again, one of the moral quandaries in this, is that he's very, very badly injured in a fight with the Diamond Dogs, to the point where he wasn't sure he would survive. He wasn't sure he would wake up after one of them hit him. And Chrysalis forces him to feed off of the love of his friends, the loving dreams of them, to heal him. But he finds it repugnant. He doesn't want to, even though it means that he will survive, he doesn't want to do it. And she asks him, she says, which would you prefer, being morally right and dead, or being alive enough to judge me? And that's one of the things that does appeal about this fic, in that there are a lot of depictions of Chrysalis and of the changelings and of changeling life, and just focusing on Chrysalis herself, since she seems to be the vocal point of most changeling fics. This makes no apology for how horrible she is. This doesn't turn her into a wooby. It doesn't try and justify her actions in the Canterlot's wedding. It doesn't try to explain them away and make the audience think that she is morally right. It introduces a moral grey area and then just kind of abandons the reader and says, right, okay, you judge.
What would you have done?
Yeah, and I like that. I like that it presents the situation but doesn't guide the reader towards any particular conclusion for it. And that's hard to do in storytelling. To not ask a character to choose a side, to give good and bad points for both sides, because the ponies don't come out looking completely good in this, but they don't come out, this is not vilify the ponies and absolve all the little cute changelings. No,
not at all. So yeah, this everybody was in the wrong at some point. We learned in one of the chapters that Chrysalis's predecessor was actually much more amiable and wanted to make peace with the ponies, and the ponies at the time were not at all receptive to changelings and essentially drove them out. And in this one scene in particular, where he's talking to Tibia, who's the overseer of the Keeper caste, which watches all the little nymphs, all the changeling young, we learned that Queen Gossamer was actually,
she was Chrysalis's mother, wasn't she?
Predecessor. I'm not sure if it was revealed if she was actually the mother or not.
I think it actually was mother, because they said that any children in the hive are a result of the queen, so it has to have been. Right. Yeah.
Come to think of it, yes. And Tibia is actually Chrysalis's sister. That's right. Yeah. Came from the same brood as that. But she was actually much more willing to make peace with the ponies, and the ponies at the time were not willing to share the goods. The ponies already had all the good lands, and so Gossamer actually asked the changelings who were integrated among pony society at the time to reveal themselves to their partner, in the hopes that at least just one of them would be sympathetic to the changelings, but not one of them were, and that's when the changelings were driven underground, and that's when Chrysalis came to power, because the hive almost starved.
There is... One of the things is that underneath the Changeling City is the old Changeling Empire, and some of the Changelings want to be able to go down there and to explore and to rebuild and to make the Changeling people great again, but they can't, because quandaries have completely taken over down there, and Diamond Dogs, and the Changeling Empire crumbled when the ponies rejected them, and ever since then they have been scratching at this living. And Chrysalis is too proud to think of any other way of doing it. That any alternative to the way that she has decided things will be is rejected out of Hoof. As we find when Caramel, he tries to inject some originality into things. He tries to present other options. And he said, the ponies who rejected you all back then are not the ponies who are up there now. I'm one of them. Would one of those old ponies have come and tried to become part of the hive? And Chrysalis can't reconcile her own prejudices and her experiences in Canterlot with what he's saying.
But so the Quarry Eels attack. Caramel attempts to do what he thinks is the right thing at the time, and go after the pony that's in the pod that the Quarry Eel is attempting to drag down and presumably eat and kill. And just sort of in the fracas, Rax, one of his changeling friends that he met since he was down there, is killed. And later it's revealed that the pony that was in the pod anyway was old and senile, and arguably better off still living in the pod in the dream world. And so this moral sort of gray area is it's all well and good to try to take the moral high ground when you've got all the goods, right? When you live in a land of riches where everybody has everything that they need, but it's not so easy when you live underground. You're constantly under attack. But yes, the moral gray areas in the stories, that's what I found most appealing about it. Is about halfway through the story, and that's when it really grabbed me, and I said, wow, I have to see how this thing ends. And that's right when Thornquill, when I come to Thornquill's reading, and then I had to wait, and I was like, oh, this is the worst thing ever. I was tempted just for a moment to go and read the story with my eyes, in text form like a peasant. Fortunately, Thornquill picked it up not long after.
Yeah, he did say that he really wanted to do that one from the moment that he first read it. He said he knew he wanted to do a reading of it, and it was quite an undertaking.
Oh yes.
It's like I said, it's nearly 120,000 words. Give or take 1,000 or two, but it took from December 2012 until February 2014 for the author to write it, and one of the chapters is close to 15,000 words for a single chapter. For some people, that's too much for a whole story, let alone one chapter. So Thornquill was having to split it between 2 uploads rather than have just 1 2-hour upload. So it was quite undertaking.
Oh yes, the fact that it's the quality is so consistent throughout was really we've learned since from our good friend Thornquill that it kind of took a lot out of him, the poor guy.
Yeah, but, he's taking a break for a while.
Yeah, a well-deserved break, I might add. But yes.
Oh yes. But this story is, I don't read a lot of changeling fiction, so the things that I've come across in Heroic Review, we did one called Much to the Scaffold, which was a Chrysalis Reformation story. This isn't a Reformation story. It's not an apologist story. It does reconcile pony kind and changeling kind, but it does it in an interesting way. It doesn't use Celestia. It uses Luna. And it makes so much more sense in the context of this story with the world building of the changelings. It makes more sense for it to be Luna who brokers the peace treaty, Luna and with help from Caramel and Sassaflash, because Luna understands about being lonely. She understands about wanting more than you're allowed to have and being rejected for it and having to live with the consequences of that. and ultimately realize that you were both right and wrong in your original actions.
Definitely a really good choice using Luna instead of Celestia for that aspect of the story. We've seen lots and lots of stories where changelings want to become ponies, and it's one of those things where all changelings are evil and all ponies are good, and the story is all about changelings learning to counter their own nature, which is inherently evil, as we all know, and want to become a pony. But this story does it completely backwards. We have a pony becoming a changeling. And it's like, again, going back to the shades of gray. There is no moral, there is no clearly defined black and white.
Yeah, it's one of the things that always annoyed me from the little bits of changeling fiction that I have seen and that I have listened to. It does seem to be pony equals good, and changeling doesn't always equal absolute bad. But pony is never, it's never questioned as being a bad thing. The ponies are the good guys. The ponies are the kind ones. The ponies are the generous ones. The ponies are the creatures that the changelings want to be. And here Caramel has to accept the fact that ponies themselves are flawed. They're not evil, which is the other thing that's happened in a couple of changeling fics. Not any that I've read, but I've heard of. That ponies are characterized as being absolutely evil, and they will kill the poor little changelings. And the changelings, that's Changeling Apologist fics, where the changelings become the woobies. This doesn't. It presents the flaws and the plus points of each of the two races, and then says, because of their very natures and because of their history, these two cultures don't interact very well. And this is a lot of the reason that they are destined not to get on. And then you have someone like Caramel, who becomes a hybrid. And by the end of the story, he's not a full changeling. He is a hybrid. And he will remain a hybrid. He's not going to become a full changeling. He is enough of one to be able to survive in the hive, but he wants to be a reminder that ponykind is not evil.
That was one of the things that turned me off of the story. Towards the beginning, I sure am glad I stuck with it. But was just sort of the depiction of what life was like in the hive. I'd imagined it more like the Borg Collective from Star Trek. And so my own ideas of what the story was like was kind of at odds with the author's vision of the story. But one of the things that turned me off to the story to begin with was Caramel has first come to the hive. He's brought before Chrysalis, and he's sort of pleading his case about why he should be allowed to join the hive. And he essentially tells Chrysalis, it's because I love Sassaflash. And it sort of struck me as odd, and Chrysalis is like, oh, really? And so she eventually agrees. But I was like, if I was a queen, I would want my subjects to be loyal to me, not loyal to someone else. And so I thought it was really odd choice, and I had a hard time reconciling that later. But as it turned out, she had that was all explained completely in the later fics, because as a hybrid, as he slowly begins this process of becoming a changeling, or maybe just a half changeling, he is able to generate love himself, and this was sort of Chrysalis's plan B, to have a pony someone in the hive who could generate love themselves.
And that was her original plan for Shining Armour, which does explain a lot of the plot points and the plot holes in A Canterlot Wedding.
That was quite nice, yeah. Just had a little headcanon there. We learned that Shining Armour was being fed this royal jelly, it's called, the catalyst for changing a pony into a changeling. It's a very finite resource. It's not one that she has a whole lot of, but she fed Shining Armour just a tiny bit of it, just enough to make him susceptible to her mind control, and that explains parts of the Canterlot Wedding. So I thought that was a nice little touch.
Yeah, and the whole plan of that was to bring him back to the changeling hive and convert him into a hybrid, so that he could then just pretend to be Shining Armour all the time, but actually be 100% under her control, and they could start to take over ponykind from there, because if she has control of Shining Armour, she has access to all the chemicals needed that she needs to make more royal jelly. And as it happens, Luna does allow her to have research materials to find out more about this for any other ponies who did fall in love with changelings, who would like to become like Caramel. And Luna allows for the fact that some ponies would want to do that. And Celestia does allow it for it as well. She's kind of a distant presence in this story. That Celestia isn't really featured anywhere, apart from the penultimate chapter. Which some people will be turned off by that, because it is meant to be that they are co-regents, but it's handled well up to a point. maybe Celestia could have been more involved during some of the negotiations, but that's pretty much, your mileage may vary.
I think you're absolutely right. Luna was absolutely the right choice to be the royal presence in this story later on. It's that yearning for something that you can't have because others have said you can't have it is made her sort of maybe sympathetic to the plight of the changelings and also just to Chrysalis. So that was I really liked that choice.
Yeah, and again, Chrysalis herself softens. She doesn't become just an insect version of Celestia, which is what happens in some stories. She doesn't become just Chrysalis in name only. She is still irascible, she is still proud, she is still kind of cruel. Mm-hmm. But she also softens to the point that she acknowledges that when she frees the ponies from the pods and she walks them back to a village for a sort of prisoner handover, with pony kind. Just a random background character says, do you think that this will make it all okay? Do you think that just saying you're sorry and that you're giving us back will be all right? And the others are kind of trying to shush this pony. But Chrysalis turns around and you think she's going to fly off the handle. But instead she just says, you're right. Words are meaningless. Get ready to leave. And walks away. And even Caramel is surprised that she didn't just take this pony's head off. And it shows in a realistic way what a softening of a character like that would be. It wouldn't be completely changing her personality. It would be, in little ways, not reacting subtle. The same way. Yeah.
Absolutely, that was a good thing. It was subtle, but it was very, very believable. It was like, yeah, you're right. More words are meaningless. So get your stuff. We're going.
Yeah.
I liked it.
Yep, and it stayed true to the spirit of the character. Right, you said at the very beginning that there were some things you didn't like about this story. So, did you care to elaborate on that?
Sure. Just a few little nitpicky things. Many fewer so than most of the fics that I really enjoy. So yeah, just a few niggling little things. But the depiction of shining armor was just always a little just a little thorn in my side. Just because it's completely, I think, irreconcilable with the depiction of shining armor that we see in the show, and particularly in the comics, where he's depicted as being a D&D nerd, whereas in this story he's definitely more of a jock, athletic type, and kind of a jerk. So in the fact that we kept going back over and over again to the flashbacks, and we kept seeing shining armor, and he was just a constant antagonist. I didn't like that part. Just some other character probably would have worked just as well.
I think that might be to do with when the fic was written. This was written in December 2012 was when it started, and I get the feeling that with a story like this, the author knew where this was going from the start. And I don't think they would have deviated. Obviously, the author may want to correct me on this, but I don't think they would have deviated too much from that original plan, because of the way that the story is written with the two parallel timelines. It would be very difficult to alter plans and not have them all set out in advance. For that reason, until we came back with Shining Armor's appearances in the comics and appearances in the show, we didn't have that much characterization for him. We only had a Canterlot wedding, and as many people have pointed out, he and Cadence weren't characterized particularly, well, incisively. We didn't know that much about him, other than he's Twilight's big brother, he's very protective, and he loves his bride-to-be. That's not much to go on.
True. So it's definitely forgivable, and especially in light of everything that's happened since then. It's just a little thing, but every time I came back to that, I was like, oh, he's not right. Shining's a good guy.
Well, I kind of like the idea that he exits the story when he goes off to the training academy, doesn't he? I like to think that they just kind of beat the bad behaviour out of him.
Could be, but I think, even in the Canterlot wedding, he's depicted as being like an awesome big brother and stuff like that. So it was a little hard to reconcile.
I don't know, you can be an awesome big brother or big sister and still be a horrible person to everybody else.
Really? Okay. Yeah. Maybe that has been my experience with my siblings, but all right.
That's a multifaceted personality.
Maybe that's just my siblings then.
Yeah, I know. I was absolutely foul to my sisters growing up, but I like to think I'm not a bad person.
You turned out alright, I suppose.
Yeah, there's only a little bit of mental scarring with them now, and I only have a little bit of a scar between my eyes where one of them hit me with a badminton racket.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's
That's
nothing really.
You know.
But yeah, I think it's a family relationship, and the way that people act with non-family members, it can be very, very different. So I didn't have that much problem with that. What I did question was where the early story was set. if Shining Armour was there, because he very clearly, like Twilight, grew up in Canterlot.
Mm-hmm. So there was, was that an inconsistency, or was it, I kind of flipped back through the opening chapters. I don't think it ever says explicitly that it was set in Ponyville or set in Canterlot, but if it was in Canterlot, like, I didn't remember reading about a bunch of spires and things.
Yeah, and the camping trip, was that a trip away from school, or did they all move to Pony? It seems so strange that all of these friends moved wholesale to a small village.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a bit of a plot hole. It was a nice idea, quite possibly needed a little bit of fine-tuning. Maybe having the Sparkle family move away or something.
Or just sort of explicitly say why why everybody who's lived in Canterlot is now in Ponyville. So just, like I said, a minor plot point, especially given in light of everything else going on in the story and everything else I liked about the story. Just a tiny little niggling thing.
Yeah, I mean, it does come when you have to find niggling things, because the story is very, very well written.
Overall, absolutely.
Yeah. I remember reading a review of it once on One Man Pony blog by Chris, and he didn't like it all that much. He said that it was very informative and had a lot of world building, but he didn't think that it was particularly engaging. So I saw that Thornquill was doing this with some degree of interpretation, because I wasn't expecting great things, and I was pleasantly surprised.
I was certainly engaged, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And I would say that other people will be as well. If you can give it the time to develop, and you can be open to a very different interpretation of the changeling culture, I think there's a lot to get out of this story.
Absolutely.
Would you like to add anything else, or are we drawing to a close?
I think we're drawing to a close, but overall, 2 thumbs up, and definitely listen to Thornquill's reading if you have a chance, because he knocked it out of the park.
Very much so. I think this is probably the best thing he's done to date.
I agree.
He's a very high bar he's got to jump over for next time.
Yep.
Oh yeah, but he'll do it. We have faith! Although by the time this podcast comes out, maybe he'll be on his next project.
Yeah, that's all right.
So, thank you very much for joining me today, Neighrator.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
And, forget my own name, I don't know. And any links and things are in the doobly-doo, and any comments below. We will answer anything that is a pertinent question, suggestions for future podcasts, and we hope to see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.